welcome everyone to CHPA's webinar series, Working with Modular. I'm Frank Lohmann, CHPA's Director, Building Science, and I'm one of the hosts today of today's webinar. My background is in codes and building science, and I have worked with CHPA's Modular Construction Council for the last 2 years. I am joined by Kathleen Maynard for today's webinar. Kathleen is CHPA's Senior Director of Building Innovation. Kathleen has been working with Canada's modular sector for more than 2 decades. And we're both part of CHPA's technical team that supports the CHPA Modular Construction Council. And most, if not all, the images you'll see in today's webinar are from factory builders on the Modular Construction Council. Before we get started, some housekeeping. We have muted all participants so that there are no distractions. We will, however, try to make it a little bit interactive. So I think some of you have already figured this out. You can ask questions throughout by writing them in the question panel. And we may answer them in writing during the meeting, during the webinar, or live at the end, depending on whether we have time available. We will have a few polls for you. When we launch a polling question, you'll see a response function pop up. Actually, let's try that right now with the question on the primary region where you do business. And while you all pick your regions of primary business activity, I'll continue to tell you that the webinar is being recorded and the replay will be available on the CHPA website tomorrow, hopefully, in case you can't stay to the end or you want to listen to a certain portion again. And following this webinar, we will also post the slide deck to this webinar on the CHPA website on the Modular Construction webpage. I'm seeing that we're 100% answered, so maybe let me just end the poll here. Oh, we ended the poll. That's interesting. So we have almost equal participation from BC, Prairies, and Ontario, Quebec. A few national and Atlantic. Nobody from outside Canada, which is okay. We're focusing on Canada. And nobody from the territories. Maybe we'll call a few people afterwards. That's great, thank you. So I know that everyone by this time of the pandemic is experienced in any Zoom or Team or WebEx meeting, just to remind you that you can size your screen and manage your own view of the webinar and make the PowerPoint bigger or smaller by sliding the bar in between the panels if you have multiple panels open. Okay, then let me say a few words about the webinar series itself and then and why we're giving it. I still see the poll here. Sorry, okay, there we go. Organizing my screens. The entire webinar series consists of 7 webinars that will be delivered between April and December. And you can see the titles on the dates on the right. The purpose of the Working with Modular series is to provide information on the modular construction sector in Canada. That means we hope that code officials, municipal planners, housing specialists in general find an interest in what we present, as well as builders, for example, who currently build homes on site rather than off site in the factory, or builders who have started experimenting with prefabricating their own panels and are ready for the next step. We also hope that some federal government departments and other stakeholders engaged in the residential construction industry find the information useful and apply it in their work. And I saw that some were from national in their work area, so maybe that is some of the government participants here. Actually, let's try to find the other poll to find out how these groups are represented in today's participants. So please vote again as to what describes best the discipline of your profession. And I will continue maybe the slide. No, we'll just wait, it goes faster. Participants are all well-trained Zoom participants. There you go. And we're getting new people on board. So it's okay, so this is interesting. So it says that we have a few modular builders on the call. That's great. And some site builders, renovators, as well as developers. So the construction industry is super well represented. We have a few code officials, some municipal planners, and housing providers and government. So that's great. That's good for us to know. And we will continue to do this through all the other webinars and then maybe skew our slides accordingly. Great, thank you so much. So in this webinar, excuse me, I gotta take my poll panel away. In this webinar, we will be the only two speakers from CHPA, Kathleen and I, while in the other webinars in the series, we may have expert co-presenters from industry to give us more in-depth details on the topics at hand. And at this point, we'd also like to acknowledge Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for supporting the development of this webinar series, as well as Altus Group for their work on the project. Today's webinar provides a general and high-level introduction to modular construction in Canada, spanning from terminology describing the industry to the benefits of modular construction. And along the way, we will touch briefly on factory construction process, the code compliance part, and finance and warranty information for factory constructed buildings. Here's the roadmap through today's webinar. We have divided the webinar into 5 sections that pretty much mirror the other webinars we will be giving in the series. The last section includes some general benefits, but also environmental benefits. And as you saw earlier, we will have an entire webinar dedicated to environmental benefits on May 26th, same time as today, 12:30 Eastern. Whoops, my apologies. So let's first clarify then a few things on terminology and so that we all mean the same thing when we talk about different products of the modular construction industry. And then we'll look at some of the building types and industry statistics to give you a first impression of the look and feel of the modular construction industry. So terminology. The first list here contains terms that are sometimes used as synonyms when people talk about factory construction of homes and buildings and installing or assembling them on site. So you hear factory build, you hear industrialized, modern methods sometimes, or off-site construction, or prefabricated. All of those are synonyms meaning something happens off-site and not on-site. The second list at the bottom identifies different products. So the list goes from least complete to most complete when they leave the factory. And I'll go in a little bit of detail for each of those. So panelized, for example, sometimes also called flat pack, refers to panels shipped from the factory to the building site for assembly. These can be walls, floors, ceiling assemblies, and they can be described as closed panels when wall panels are delivered complete with windows, doors, siding installed. You can actually see a somewhat closed panel there on the right on the illustration. Or they're described as open panels when studs and plates and sometimes sheathing are nailed together. I don't have a picture. Well, you see one being assembled on the left, lower left bottom side there. That could become an open panel. So then the next category is pre-engineered. That refers to a kit or a package of materials that are factory cut to design specifications, and they're transported to the building site and they're assembled there. Then modular refers to a 3-dimensional finished section or sections built in a factory before they're being transported to the site for installation. You can see modules on the bottom left of the illustration or in the middle section or at the top right. Modular homes and buildings can be placed on a full perimeter foundation or a surface mount foundation. And modules can also be stacked to produce multi-story homes or buildings, or maybe even be incorporated into a high-rise superstructure. Then the last item on the list is a manufactured home. That refers to a transportable single or multiple module one-story home. So manufactured homes are complete when they leave the factory, except for the small incidental assemblies on site. And manufactured homes are typically placed on surface mount foundations. So unfortunately, this list still leaves you only with the context of the sentence that we're speaking in this presentation to figure out whether we mean the factory constructed product consisting of volumetric modules assembled on site, or whether we're referring to the entire industry as modular industry. But now at least you have some background to figure out that context. Then let's have a look at all the residential buildings first that are possible with modular factory built construction. So as you can see here, modular builders serve the whole range of residential occupancy, from single-family homes all the way to worksite accommodation, student residences, and even hotels. It does include low, mid, and high-rise buildings. I don't have a picture of a high-rise building. You only see mid-rise here. That means factory construction is not limited to Part 9. Factory builders also produce Part 3 buildings. Some even specialize in that. Here are some examples of modular construction that go beyond the housing market. You can see here that modular construction is not sector, size, or even type specific. Non-residential factory constructed buildings come in all sizes and all occupancies, such as hospitals, you see one at the bottom right, or schools and daycares at the middle bottom, actually on the bottom there is a daycare, mercantile at the top left and middle, or offices at the bottom left, and even industrial occupancies. And I don't think there's a picture here. Factory constructed buildings can also be non-combustible type buildings. As I just said, Part 3 is not off limits. Some specialize in it. And let's look at some statistics. Out of 216 factories certified to Canadian standards in 2021, 181 of them are located in Canada. The Canadian manufacturers contribute about 30,000 jobs to the economy and generate $6 billion total economic activity. There's not a lot of current data on the modular sector, but the most recent report produced by Altos Group shows that the modular share of single-family home starts has ranged between 10 to 15% nationwide. And we expect that number to grow over the next decade. So now that we know the industry a little bit, I'll explain how the process in the factory happens, first step by step, and then I'll talk a little bit about where the time savings come from that you may have heard about. So factory processes and levels of automation vary among companies, but typically the factory building process is organized for assembly line production. It consists of several workstations where specific components are put together. And as the home or section is assembled, it moves along the line from one workstation to the next. It can be rolled, lifted by crane, or pulled forward along the line. And only time-consuming and specialized work, such as the construction of trusses or door frames or kitchen cabinets, for instance, is often done away from the assembly line. And all the assembly tasks, wherever possible, are done at ergonomic heights for optimized working positions. Typically, the process starts with the construction of floors, complete with plumbing and HVAC installation, and in some cases, the finished flooring material already on top. Then the process moves towards the walls. Sometimes it happens in parallel, and sometimes it happens in sequence, depends on the manufacturer. The video on the right is an animated video created by Mohammed Al Hussein. He's a professor and technology innovator for modular construction at the University of Alberta. This video will show one of these optimized automated wall assembly tables as it could exist in any factory. But as I said, assembly process differs from manufacturer to manufacturer. I'll start it here. There you go. You can watch that a little bit. You see here how lumber is assembled into one or multiple frames, and note the ergonomic work height of the assembly table. Also, the prefabricated elements in lumber are taken from above, minimizing labor and maximizing the benefit that gravity can offer. Electrical wires and plumbing could also be pre-installed at this stage. It's not shown here. And then, as you just saw, sheet materials like air barriers and sheathing are applied in fast, exact, and material efficient and optimized manner. Typically, completed wall frames are then moved onto a parallel line. You saw that earlier. And further completed, sometimes with insulation, windows or doors installed on the line before they're fastened to the floor of the home. Sometimes they go from horizontal to vertical as well in that process. So this is one of the tremendous advantages of factory built construction is that each wall, each floor, each story is built from the inside out. which provides for easy and effective installation of insulation, no gaps in corners, behind electrical outlets and other hard to reach areas. And for homeowners, this means no cold spots, no drafts, and greater indoor comfort. And technically speaking, in terms of energy efficiency and airtightness, this is a real advantage. Then the taping and mudding and painting and general finishing of interior walls is done at the same time as other interior and exterior work takes place. And at this point, the prefabricated module has become a section or a volumetric model. At the bottom here, I have a link. And so some of our Modular Construction Council members have factory videos on their websites that are very instructional and really worth a visit. You can find their websites by going to the Modular Construction Council page on the CHBA website, and then you have to locate their factory videos. Maybe by tomorrow we'll have them right underneath. We'll see what we can do there. Then once the wall and floor panels have been put together to create volumetric models, they get finished really much the same way as on-site construction, except that this happens in a dry and warm condition with the help of cranes, in some cases utilizing much larger material sizes for higher efficiency and fewer cutoffs. I would also like to point out on this slide the safety railing system on the top and the flat, firm factory working surface, which makes scaffolds easy to use and safe, and waste removal, as you can see here on the bottom, and recycling simple and quick. Then once the exterior siding and roofing are installed, the modules or sections for a given project are moved outside for transport. This step is called staging. You can see on the picture here that there's two sections that then get transported together and assembled. Once the modules or single section homes are finished and ready for transport, they get shipped to the site. Modules and sections can travel on the road or by rail, on barge, and even by air in some cases. And these images here are from a multi-unit residential net zero project completed recently. The modules are numbered and placed on the building as the plans dictate. You can see the matching of the sill plates here on the left, while the modules are placed on the foundation. This is a very precise process, as the module is held by the crane and adjusted by the workers on the bottom here until the bottom plate of the wall that joins the two sections, in this case, sits exactly on the sill plate. And then once the modules and sections are firmly assembled to make a building, the joints are covered with siding and other things on the site, and the site is restored. And at this point, the houses and buildings are usually indistinguishable from site-built projects. So wrapping up this section of the presentation, and I would like to show you this comparison of a generic on-site construction schedule at the bottom and the factory construction process at the top. I said generic, right? So you can see the beginning and at the end of the process streams that on-site and off-site processes have some steps in common, like the design stage and permitting. But then when we look at the construction of the building portion and the site development portion, the foundation, in other words, we find differences when it comes to schedule. You can see in the factory schedule that the two processes, site foundation and the construction of the superstructure, the actual building, happen in parallel, while these two steps happen in sequence during on-site construction. That is where the time savings come from that are often attributed to factory construction. Okay, now you might ask, if everything is completed in the factory, how can a building official inspect all things structural, plumbing, insulation, and how does the Electrical Safety Authority get to inspect? Next 5 minutes, I'll give you a glimpse of how the approval process works for factory constructed buildings. All new buildings, whether site or factory built, must comply with the local building codes and regulations in effect and are checked and verified by local building officials. So, however, for compliance on the work completed away from the building site, the administrative provisions of the National Building Code in Division C permit an off-site review to determine compliance with this code. In other words, the National Building Code applies the same requirements to site-built and factory-constructed buildings and requires an off-site review step for factory-constructed buildings or portions of a building. And this off-site review is done through certifying the entire factory construction process to the CSA A277 standard. CSA A277 covers certification of the factory's quality program. It's auditing and in-plant inspection requirements. It deals with total quality throughout the manufacturing process. It describes a procedure for an independent certification agency to review the quality control procedures of a factory, including periodic unannounced inspections of its products. Just want to clarify, A277 is not a building code. It's a procedure for certifying compliance of factory constructed components with the local building code and regulations of where the building is going to be installed. So if a factory constructed building in Canada bears the label of an accredited certification body, that certification body guarantees that the work completed in the factory meets the requirements of the local codes and regulations in effect at the installation site. And that then provides local inspectors with assurance that concealed components that they then cannot inspect anymore, or other factory-built parts of the home, do not require re-inspection on the site. So this is on the left, on the right here is clause 411 of the CSA A277 standard, and it says that you have to comply with the local codes and regulations in force. So in a province or chartered city that has enacted its own building code, those local codes would apply to the construction of a factory-built home and the in-factory inspection. If there are no local codes or regulations in force, the building must be designed and constructed to comply with the National Building Code or CSA Z240MH standard. And if there are other national codes and standards that are applicable, for example, the National Plumbing Code, National Electrical Code, or Energy Code. The CSA Z240MH series provides technical requirements specifically for single or multiple section, one-story factory-built homes. So for the most part, that standard actually mirrors the requirements of the National Building Code. There are a few differences, including some more stringent requirements that related to durability and the protection of units during transport, wind resistance, for example. There are other standards applicable to modular construction as well. For example, CSA Z240.10.1, it's called Site Preparation, Foundation, and Installation of Buildings, which can also be applied to site-built buildings placed on surface mount foundations. The National Building Code also refers to CSA A660, certification of steel building system manufacturers, and a new CSA standard Z250 has just been published. This is an administrative procedure for modular high-rise buildings. Finally, have a look at the center here. The label shows that a home was certified to CSA A277. It reads based on the requirements of CSA A277 and the NBC as detailed on the specification sheets inside the house. So that's the scope of their certification for this house. Then a word on bylaws. Occasionally, our Modular Construction Council members come across examples of municipal bylaws that set restrictions for factory-built housing. And we understand the history of why they may have restricted types of buildings allowed in their municipalities. But we urge them to review these bylaws in the context of today's variety of architectural styles in which factory-constructed buildings are available. And you can see some on the right. In addition to code compliance that we just discussed, we also often stress to municipalities that factory-built housing can easily meet the same architectural design guidelines as site-built. And some municipalities may not realize that factory-constructed homes and housing solutions can also help them meet many of their policies, such as affordable housing, age-friendly housing, secondary suites and garden units, or in general, sustainable design. So if one of you comes across barriers like this in your projects, please help us to update these bylaws. Okay, at this point, I'm handing over to Kathleen to provide an overview of financing and warranty.
Great, thanks, Frank, and good day, everybody. I'm going to make some talk a bit briefly about financing and warranty, business and ownership models, financing options, and how there might be aspects that are a bit different for modular homes or buildings. But actually, there aren't that many differences. But let's review. So the modular construction sector operates with some different business models. Some factories have a network of site builders or retailers who sell homes directly to consumers. Some factories partner with developers, and some factories sell directly to consumers. And some factories operate with more than one of these models or with all of them. So those business models may affect how financing and warranty works. Then there are some ownership models where factory built homes might differ a bit. So based on the ownership model, the mortgage may be the same as on-site home construction. That first bullet where the individual home and lot are purchased together, it's for all intents and purposes the same as if the home was wholly site built. The second model, where a consumer buys the home but leases the lot, is not exclusive to factory built, but is seen more often with factory built than with site built. And less common is when the purchasers buy the home and lease to own the lot. So land lease ownership lowers the cost of owning a home and often helps young families, low income, fixed income homeowners to free up money for other things, because the cost of the lot is not part of the sales transaction. So it can also allow for access to services through the management company operating the land lease community, such as security or health assistance. Land lease allows for efficient use of land because the lots are often narrower or smaller. So this ownership model is also considered by many to be environmentally responsible. So most of you are likely familiar with the options available to finance a home purchase. We have mortgages, a home equity line of credit, personal loans. They're negotiated with lending institutions or through brokers, and they apply to both site-built and factory-built homes alike. High ratio mortgages, those where the purchaser is not able to provide a 20% down payment, as most of you know, require mortgage insurance under federal regulations. So a special type of mortgage insurance is available for homes that are considered movable and are therefore classed as chattels. And I'll talk about that a bit more on the next slide. But just a note here that a lot of innovation is happening in the housing financing sector right now, especially related to energy efficiency and climate change resilience. So different lenders offer special financing mechanisms for that type of transaction. So as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about chattel loan insurance. So one aspect of financing that is typically more exclusive to factory built homes is chattel loan insurance. So that is where this type of mortgage insurance is most common with manufactured homes installed on leased land, typically those placed on surface mount foundations. So this type of mortgage insurance was created originally to improve access to lower cost housing, making access to home ownership available for more people. Chattel loan insurance insures lenders against borrower default where homes are considered movable, where the purchase does not include the land on which the home is installed. Warranty programs and requirements vary across Canada, but there are essentially three sources of warranty for factory-built homes. There's provincial new home warranty programs, of course, third-party private warranty providers, and home manufacturers, factory-built housing producers offer their own warranties as well. So both factories and their site builder partners participate in provincial new home warranty programs. In some provinces, it's mandatory. Whoever makes the sales transaction with the home buyer is the party responsible for the warranty. So the details of the programs and how they apply to factory-built housing vary from one province to another. For example, in some jurisdictions, a single warranty may be provided for both the home and the foundation, or two separate warranties may be issued if the foundation is provided by a separate contractor. So in addition to provincial and private third-party warranty, factory-built home producers also provide their own warranties to both retail and wholesale purchasers, whether they're selling direct to consumers or through a site builder or developer partner. So we will get more into details of financing and costs and warranty in the financing for factory built webinar of this Working with Modular series. So I hope you'll join us for that session later in the year. And with that, I will hand it back to Frank for the last section, the benefits of modular construction.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, finally, let's talk about all the good things, the benefits of modular construction. I will touch first on industry capacity here and the primary forces in every project, quality, time, and cost. And then I have an extra slide on affordability, and then I'll finish with environmental benefits at the end. So just to clarify, capacity here on this slide is not the entire industry capacity. We only refer here to those areas that we picked out where the industry capacity for modular construction may have advantages over on-site construction. Labor, for example, constructing buildings in a factory setting facilitates access to labor and sometimes labor availability. So modular construction is broadening that labor pool in two ways. Number one, factory construction may need other types of skilled workers like machine operators or machining or robotic specialists, for example. And second, some modular construction workers may work at single stations and may be able to work on a narrower scope of their work and therefore may not need the same breadth of skills that tradesmen on a traditional site would require. These two features reduce the dependency on the same labor and skills for on-site construction. To be clear, though, it's not necessarily less labor to build modular houses, but where shortage of labor exists, panelized or modular construction may also add capacity to supplement on-site builders. And yeah, maybe where a company explores AI and fully automated robotics, the labor profile may then change a bit more drastically. And also somewhat related to labor, modular construction can also fill capacities in areas where there aren't enough skilled trades, like in many rural and remote areas. And obviously, factory construction is a great way to introduce automation to speed up production and increase productivity from semi-automated processes like cutting or nailing to fully automated assembly of some components. Next, let's look at quality, time, and cost. We'll start with quality here. I already mentioned the inspection and approval process as part of the quality system under A277. That is one big part of quality assurance. And the CSA A277 standard also sets requirements for personnel, their qualifications, schedules for inspection, a quality manual, labeling requirements, and as I mentioned earlier, the technical requirement compliance procedures. Plus, the factory construction process happens in controlled conditions. That's reducing the use of damaged or deteriorated materials. And where fully or semi-automation is part of the process, there is likely a quality increase due to better repeatability of the same process step. Time. Okay, according to a McKinsey report in 2019, modular construction can cut the schedule by 20 to 50%. We saw that earlier in the process slide. The largest time benefit probably comes from off-site and on-site work taking place at the same time. But factory building also does not suffer delays from poor weather or challenges associated with scheduling trades. So the fact that the factory built portion is already inspected when it arrives at the site, and that the inspection is easier to schedule in the factory also add further time savings. And the shorter timelines are not only beneficial from a cost standpoint, they also have a downstream effect on the environment. Since modular buildings can be completed, in some cases, twice as fast, they have much lower energy use during construction overall and a lower impact on the area immediately surrounding the construction site. And finally, cost. According to the same 2019 McKinsey report, modular construction can cut costs by 20%. The report quotes an owner or one manufacturer that estimates that only 25% of time spent on site is creating value for them, while 75% of time spent in the factory creates value. These cost savings come through efficiencies of construction and obviously the time savings we just discussed, but also through a greater ability to control costs, a broader labor pool, tighter schedules, shorter deliveries, and as well reduced waste. There are also fewer budget overruns by using modular construction, even when compared with conventional site-built construction with the lean production methods and material optimization. So much of this then translates into better affordability, 20% cost reduction, and up to 50% time saved, plus greater budget certainty through upfront decisions, allow economies of scale and optimizing the modules for repeatability, like in these two rental projects from the Toronto Housing Secretariat. These two projects were designed to support people who have experienced homelessness. The building at the top is a 3-story rental apartment building with 56 studio apartments, common rooms, a dining room, program space, and administrative offices. The 11 Macy Avenue building opened in December 2020, approximately 8 months after being approved by City Council. The project at the bottom is a 3-story rental apartment building with 44 studios and much the same setup, common rooms, dining room, program space, and offices. It opened on January 2021, approximately 9 months after being approved. So this is great for public housing, but the same economies of scale exist also for private market multifamily units in this scale. For the environmental benefits specific to factory constructed buildings, we'll start with energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions before we get to sustainability. Factory-based builders have repeatedly been first out of the gate when it comes to the environment. So number one, when the R2000 standard was introduced in Canada, I think it's now 40 years ago, it was a factory builder who first became the largest producer of R2000 homes and the first EnviroHome. EnviroHome is an R2000 home that showcases proven and commercially available environmental features. And that home was built at the Prestige Home Factory in Sussex, New Brunswick. Number two, the first of Canada's equilibrium net zero demonstration homes. Net zero homes generate more energy than they consume. Actually, the equilibrium was built at the Alouette Homes Factory near Granby, Quebec. Number three, the factory constructed townhouse complex was a 2012 winner of the Most Efficient House Award in the Energuide Rating Service Award. And number four is Canada's first entirely built green community promoting green building practices in Alberta. It was created with the help of factory-based builder, as was Canada's first geothermal manufactured housing community. And then number five, it refers to a 2009 study done by the University of Alberta, conducted by Mohammed Al-Hussein, who I mentioned earlier. This study estimates a 43% reduction in operational carbon during construction. And this was estimated by accompanying the entire process of constructing the Northridge Place Seniors Affordable Housing Project. And we will have a lot more details about this study on May 26 in our Modular and the Environment webinar. From the same study, for example, here are some real game winners when it comes to reducing waste during construction. The factory-based process allows larger material sizes and causes therefore fewer or no cutoffs at all, as we saw earlier in the production video. Plus, the stationary nature of a factory and controlled conditions make it much easier to recycle effectively. Reusing leftover materials in other projects is also easier because materials are adequately stored and protected. And on typical site-built construction, this kind of optimization and reuse may be more difficult due to distance between projects and the rushed pace of construction to make the most of the good weather season. And that in itself is another benefit of factory construction. The steady all-season pace of construction allows efficiencies and optimization that site-built projects cannot easily provide. Lastly, relocatable buildings are manufactured products that reduce the overall environmental impact of construction. They are often used as worksite accommodation in remote locations. They eliminate the need for demolition and new construction and are therefore also very sustainable. We talk more and more about the social aspects of sustainability as well. So the last but not least of the benefits of factory construction are benefits that affect the well-being of the workers in the factory. Measures to create safe working conditions in factories lead to fewer accidents. And many of the automated tasks create more ergonomic working conditions, reducing injuries, as we saw earlier. And one more thing, there's always good weather on the construction site. So that was already our overview of working with Modular. Since this presentation is itself a summary of our upcoming webinars, we won't further summarize the summary, other than to thank you for listening and to say that we hope you will be interested in learning more about the opportunities and benefits that modular construction holds in Canada. And all that's left to remind you is that we will post the slide deck and the recording hopefully by tomorrow, and we encourage you to visit our member factory websites through the CHPA portal. And as I mentioned already, the next webinar, Modular and the Environment, is coming up on May 26th, same time, 12:30 Eastern. And with that, I think we are ready for questions, and I'll hand it back over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Frank. Okay, we do have a number of questions in the chat. Some are along the same lines, but I will, I'll try and cover them in as many as I can in the time available, or I might ask Frank to jump in. So there is a question from a building inspector in British Columbia that we talked about the CSA A277 certification procedure to determine compliance. And the inspector's inquiring, if we move the factory built home to another area, how do we know it complies with the codes? So this is actually something that we didn't talk about. So with the factory certification label that is on the homes, they're accompanied by what we call a specification sheet. And that sheet details specific aspects of construction, such as snow loads, wind loads, the type of construction. So the local inspector who receives a house that's been moved from another jurisdiction can check those specs against the requirements in their area. There's also, the inspector's also asking, does the label show who the certification body was? Yes, it does. I think the one that we showed in our slides was from Quality Auditing Institute. There are other certification bodies, CSA, who am I not thinking of? Intertech Testing Services, NTA. There's, I believe, 6 or 7 certification bodies accredited by the Standards of Council of Canada right now. So the label absolutely shows who the certification body was. The inspection cycle for the factories usually depends on the factory and their record. With the certification body, there are random in-factory inspections by the certification body of all plants. They're likely more frequent in a new plant. But there is a minimum number that is specified as well. So I hope that answers your question. We have a number of questions about the percentages, the differences in cost and time. So I'll try and answer all of those at once. I mean, as many of you would know, the cost savings for a project, whether it's factory or site built, it always depends on a specific project. Typically, and Frank referred to a relatively new report that does offer some good analysis that we can make available as well. But as far as when we talk about the cost savings, we're generally talking about the cost of construction. So on top of that, you're going to add the cost of delivery. For rural and remote locations, that could cancel out the savings during construction in the factory. Also the time difference in construction schedules and installation schedules can lead to soft cost savings, which are are typically of great interest to public housing and providers and for developers, because the savings on carrying financing and capital costs will be lowered when you can compress those delivery schedules. I'm just looking through other questions here. Someone's asking if we can describe the construction differences between a modular and a manufactured home, example 2x6 construction, etc. So that is also going to vary by the builder and the factory. Basically, as Frank was describing, the same building code requirements apply. So whether or not the specifications that a builder offers may differ, but they're all going to be following the requirements of the local building codes, and in many cases exceeding those. I'm just going to check down here if we have other different types of questions. Someone's asking about average waiting time in the queue. And there's another one, varies by location. It varies by the manufacturer. In these times, everybody is working flat out. So times waiting in the queue to have home deliveries are probably a little longer than usual, just because we do have such a high housing supply challenge. Some factories will say that they're booked out until next year. Other factories maybe this fall. So it really depends on the company you're working with and what their current bookings are already like.
Maybe I'll take one and then you can take a break and correct me if I'm wrong afterwards. So it's a question from Remy too. Yes.
Water.
If the economic benefits are so compelling, why modular construction remains so limited, and what slows its wide adoption? This is the reason we're giving this webinar. It couldn't be better expressed as a question to, I think there needs to be more information about these kind of benefits, and this webinar is our first step, and we will, and hopefully each of these participants has conversations in their area of practice to incorporate some even first step panelization, prefabrication, and see, or working with a factory builder, and that's how we can scale this faster. But as Kathleen just said, there are sometimes limitations in regional things and or labor. They affect the industry in much the same way. But on the information front, we're trying to do our best to actually explain this to everyone where those benefits are. So you have another one. Let's see here. Oh, there's very specific questions here on wind resistance. I mean, maybe I'll just answer this in general. So because the modules have to be transported in most cases across the road and therefore are exposed under construction to wind, they're often built much stronger against lateral resistance, which makes the entire finished building in the end also often superior and meeting higher wind requirements than the code would otherwise require. And actually, if you're going to the modular webinar on the environment, you'll find out that there are real benefits potentially for resilience in the fact that the construction happens in a factory. So many of the failures we see in terms of wind or wildfire or even flooding happen under construction when the buildings are not as well protected. And obviously having the building portion produced in a factory saves that risk of having the structure under construction being, blown down by a tornado or burnt by a wildfire. But we'll talk more about that.
I just see another one here, Frank, more about the CSA 277 standard and a participant asking what is the recourse if a modular home manufacturer is not doing what CSA, what the standard specifies. So, of course, none of the modular council members would ever be not doing what they're supposed to do, but if that did happen, the certification body has the power to deny the manufacturer their labels. The manufacturer does have a commitment to the certification body and is audited, and so the certification body does control in certain aspects what manufacturers need to be doing. So there is that assurance built into the process.
I have another one here from Peter Smith. Focus seems to be predominantly on wood construction. What does steel framing offer and other newer construction materials? So yeah, there are manufacturers that offer steel frame modules, and that's often, as you can suspect, probably for Part 3 buildings, for higher rise buildings, mid-rise or high-rise buildings. Often the case. And so I would say that steel is fairly established. And Mohammed Al Hussein at the University of Alberta is also experimenting with other prefabrication and modular volumetric solutions using other materials. I think he's working on something with concrete, but predominantly I think it is correct, at least among our members, as far as I know, that they're mostly working on the wood frame construction domain.
I see another question too, looking for insights on the regional level, whether production is more prevalent in certain regions or provinces. So there are the Alberta and Quebec have the highest number of factories in Canada. BC also has several factories. The Atlantic has a cluster of factories. There's the factory built construction industry is actually strongest in provinces other than Ontario. Typically, we always say that it's because of the factory built industry's historic roots in or traditional roots in the rural housing market, and because Ontario is so densely populated and has such an urban focus, we have seen less of an uptake for factory built in the past. This has changed, of course. We now see lots of factory built in urban settings with infill and so, but that is why we think the regional representation is the way it is. Also, because in the coastal provinces, there is a lot of export that goes on with factory built. So when you are on one coast or the other, it's more likely that you're going to be shipping overseas.
And there are a few questions of where to find lists of factory and modular factory builders. And as I said earlier, a couple of times, when you go to the CHBA page, chba.ca, and go to the Modular Construction Council page on that, there's a number of links to manufacturers on the bottom. And as I said, we will also post potentially on that page our slide deck and the link to this webinar, but also the videos for their construction, for their process, for their factory videos, which I found very, very helpful. So that's a first stop for anyone who's looking for modular factory builders in their region. And what else do we have here? Yeah, I don't know, Kathleen, there's a question on qualifications for building officials or for officials inspecting in factory. Do you know anything about that? Is that part of the standard, or should we take that as a follow-up maybe?
No, it's not part of the standard. It would be part of what the certification bodies are required by Standards Council of Canada to get their accreditation. So I would, and I'm not personally familiar with it, but I'm loving all these questions because it's excellent for our preparation for the rest of the webinars in this series. We'll know what people want to know about.
Yeah. And I see people are adding lots of questions, so I'm scrolling down to see if there's something that we haven't seen. Yeah, and some are long.
We do have a question about airtightness.
Yes, I saw that.
And airtightness testing on site. And so I'll try to answer that one. At present, factories are the homes coming from the factories are subject to the same requirements. So if the local jurisdiction requires an on-site airtightness test, they will have an on-site airtightness test. We have typically found that factory-built homes are very tight, excellent performance on that front. I would make the point that it is very difficult for factories in some locations where there are not a lot of energy advisors, so it can be very costly to bring them in to a remote location to do an on-site air tightness test. Factories do also test in the plants, some of them. And so we typically have looked for ways that we can provide verification of air tightness without requiring that on-site test, but they still are subject to that test.
Yeah. And I found too, so there's a question here, how much variety in architectural style does modular construction allow? Is it all boxy in shape? I mean, all the pictures you saw in this presentation are modular buildings. So if you download the slide deck tomorrow or you look at the webinar again, anything you saw here was modular. And there are, I think, I don't want to speak for the manufacturers, but there's a lot of variety and flexibility in their buildings. And they can do custom things as well. And so it's definitely not the boxy type anymore that people may imagine. However, I have to say, maybe boxy is currently in style. So, you know, if that's the architectural style you're looking for, you can also build that with modular. And there's one right below here, are the same standards for envelope and flame spread for residential and commercial, the same for modular buildings. As we said in the presentation, the requirements that exist for a site build on that location, if it's the national building code, if it's a provincial building code, if it's a city building code, in the reference standards, all those requirements apply also to the factory constructed building. There's no difference. Yeah, that's a good one. Is there a list of plants of factories who build in steel? How do you find them? I don't know if there's a list. It's maybe also a good thing for the future that we provide an industry portal somewhere.
We're working on that.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are actually 59 minutes. I don't have any clock near me, but I think we're within the 1 hour. So maybe we'll cut it here, and we thank you all again for attending. And I keep saying that we will post this material, and if you want to rewatch this, and I'm hoping to see you there for the next one, May 26th, for the modular and the environment, or any other of the series coming till December. And please spread the word. We were quite pleased to see that much interest. So with that, I'll wish you a nice afternoon or midday, wherever you are. And we'll say goodbye, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.